So it was just announced days ago that Eastman Kodak, typically just known as Kodak, has secured a $765 million loan from the federal government to manufacture generic pharmaceuticals. And as a result, the shares skyrocketed. The stock price has gone through the roof from a low of around $2 to now, at the time of me doing this video, about 33 and change. And with this sudden surge, you might be asking yourself, hey, is this a good time to invest in Kodak? In this video, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the subject and why you might want to pump the brakes a little bit. So stay tuned. Hey folks, Richard Walls here, and if it's your first time on the channel, welcome. What it's all about is helping you with your professional branding, career development, and personal finance. Now, if that's your cup of tea, make sure to hit the subscribe button down at the bottom and hit the notification bell so you get notified when I post new videos. And of course, if you like what you see, do me a favor and hit the like button down below, make that turn blue. Now with that said, let's get to it. Now, Kodak. It's a name I, quite frankly, haven't heard in quite a while, but for all you youngins out there, one, get off my lawn, but two, let me tell you a little bit about Kodak. Kodak was formed in 1888, so the company had been around for well over a century, and where the company really dominated the market was in photography, and anything related to photography, they were the market leaders, they were the innovators. So where things got a little bit rough was with the advent of the digital camera. So if you think about their bread and butter, which was in film, it required basically the camera, and then you have film that you put in. It's kind of the razor blade business model, if you think about it that way. So as Kodak, you would sell the camera for very cheap, but then you would sell the film and you sell a lot of it, and then you'd be involved with the production of that film. So there's a whole entire process there. But when the digital camera came around, that whole entire process wasn't really necessary. You didn't need film. So when Kodak looked at that, of course, don't get me wrong, they were actually pretty on the ball with it. They actually invented the first digital camera, but because the digital camera was a threat internally to their core business, it's not something they put a lot of focus into. So they see what I did there? But they really doubled down on their existing portfolio, which they did so to their detriment. So then you had players like Canon and Sony that were beginning to take that market share. There were many other players as well. But over time, that eroded Kodak's position in the market, so much so that there were many years of decline that eventually culminated in them filing for bankruptcy in 2012. And so they've gone through a restructuring period since then. Unfortunately, even since bankruptcy, even with the restructuring, they still see declines in revenue, still see declines in profitability. So things weren't looking too rosy for Kodak. However, as of a few days ago, their fortunes seem to have reversed a little bit, at least when it comes to the stock price. I'll get into why I'm a little bit hesitant there, but really they secured a deal with the federal government. They secured a $765 million loan to essentially start a pharmaceutical arm of Kodak and manufacture generic pharmaceutical drugs. Now, this whole deal makes sense in a lot of different ways because there is a desire for the government to have more pharmaceutical generic drugs be manufactured here domestically as opposed to in mostly other countries, namely China and India. So there's a desire there, and if they can look at Kodak, which is a legacy US company that's been around for more than a century, they've got manufacturing capacity and they have a history with use of chemicals, because essentially the filmmaking process was a chemical process by nature. And given Kodak's recent struggles since bankruptcy protection, I see it as a bit of a lifeline to a company that's been around for a long time. Now, as far as whether it's a worthwhile investment at this point, I would say no. The stock has dramatically increased from where it was just last week around the $2 mark to now $33 at the time of me making this video. Now, despite them securing this $765 million loan to start the pharmaceutical arm of Kodak, I don't see that enough as a catalyst for long-term sustainable growth. When you think about it, they're, at least from the details that I've read, they're really going to be producing generic pharmaceutical drugs. So there's really not a lot of profit in them. I mean, at that point, it's a generic drug. Anyone can produce them, and they're commoditized at that point. So in terms of long-term profitable growth, it's just really not there. And I don't think that's necessarily the intent of this deal. It's, again, mostly to bring manufacturing back to the United States. But really, when you look at this company, if that's the only factor in these investments coming in and making the stock price what it is, I think it's unfounded. I think there's too much optimism. I don't think there's enough juice to squeeze from that deal to really give me a lot of confidence in the company's long-term prospects, because that can't be the only thing. If it is, and maybe I could be totally wrong, they could double down and they could make a really good effort in pharmaceutical. They could totally reinvent themselves as a company. And if they do that, that's a different conversation. But at least at this point in time, and given their more recent history of just consistent decline, there's nothing, at least at the surface level, that gives me a whole lot of confidence. And seeing as the stock price has already gone through the roof, at this point in time, all the key players and all the institutional investors have already made their moves. They've already put money into it, and they've already liquidated their positions. Again, not all of them. The stock price is still very high, so there's still a lot of investors, retail and institutional, I would imagine, that still have a position here. But again, long term, I don't see this really going anywhere, and I don't see the stock price going much higher in the near term. And again, this is just my opinion here. And again, if the company reinvents themselves and does really well with pharmaceuticals, and that ends up being a really big engine of growth for them, then who knows? The stock price could maintain its growth and could see that kind of stability that we like to see with a company of that size. And because of all that, Kodak is going to be a hard pass for me at this point in time. I just don't have a lot of optimism in the long-term prospects. I don't see a lot of cause to be optimistic in further significant growth in the stock price. If anything, I see it probably going down over time and maybe stabilizing, certainly higher than what it was before, around the $2 mark, since they now have this pharmaceutical arm that they're standing up, and they'll see some goodness from that. But in my opinion, it's simply not enough for me to be that interested in it. Now, you might have a different opinion, and I would love to hear about it in the comments down below. So feel free to give me your perspective. If you think the company is going to be quite a bit better as a result of this deal, I'd love to hear your perspective. And for all of you investing out there, of course, don't just watch me do this video with my opinion. Make sure to do your due diligence, do your research. If you do decide to invest, make sure you do so with all the information that you can get. So with that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.